So now I want to get into the stages of adrenal fatigue, because it is a slow process. It is a very, you continually run into adrenal fatigue. And stage 1 is the alarm reaction, flight or fight response. In this stage, the body is alarmed by the stresses from the outside, like for example there's a danger which he has to get out of, and it creates kind of an anti-stress response. And this anti-stress response is done mainly by the stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone in our body, and this hormone is increased in situations where you experience stress, no matter if you consider it as positive or negative. And you actually don't really notice any physiological dysfunction after or during the response, and usually it is no problem like to have that high cortisol for a short period of time, because like normally when it's how it's supposed to be, the cortisol decreases after the stress period, and then the adrenals recover again and everything's fine. And so the cortisol is secreted by the adrenal glands. That is why the adrenals have to do with it during any stressful event, whether it is real or only perceived. And then we come to stage 2, that is the resistance response. And that is the case when you experience chronic stress, when the stress doesn't cease, pretty much. So when you have chronic stress or severe stress, like very, very severe stress in one moment, then the adrenals are eventually unable to keep up with the body's demand for our cortisol. So the cortisol stays high constantly. So in stage 2, basically the body is over-challenged over a long time. It is like it experiences chronic stress, and as I said, that can be anything, as I said in part 1. So watch part 1, otherwise you won't get it, what I want to say. And so cortisol stays high, and that really pre-programs us for burnout. So it is only a matter of time. If we don't change things, if we don't take out the stresses that got us there, then we eventually will burn out. That is just a matter of time, and that is not how it's supposed to be. Supposed to be is that you have a stress event and then you recover, like you relax and you have enough time to recover. But in today's society, everything is so like it's basically almost impossible to not have chronic stress. But you have to decide to not let that stress be in your life. So I had to do really crucial changes to my life, and to be able to recover from adrenal fatigue. And I'm going to keep these changes because I don't ever want to run into this again. So the warning signs that begin in this stage 2 and stay into stage 3, I will tell you in a second. I first go through the stages. So stage 3 is the adrenal exhaustion. That is where I landed. And so you come into that stage because at some point the adrenals can no longer support the elevated levels of stress. And as the adrenal function is weakened further and further, the body's need for adrenal hormones remains like it isn't met if the stress is not reduced. And the adrenals are no longer able to keep up with the ever increasing demand for cortisol, and yeah, hence they become exhausted. When the adrenals are exhausted, they are no longer able to maintain the appropriate levels of cortisol. And then cortisol output starts to decline, and so yeah, then you have too low cortisol. So in stage 2 you have too high cortisol, and now in stage 3 you have too low cortisol, because the adrenals are exhausted, cannot produce enough anymore. And then, yeah, that is quite severe. The body enters into the stage where the primary goal is the conservation of energy to ensure survival. So you actually are in the survival mode. And we know that from, like, when you starve or when you hunger, then the body goes into survival mode as well and becomes a fat storing machine, because, you know, it just doesn't get what it needs, and it kind of really uses all the energy and all the facilities it has to keep itself alive. And that is why it also stores fat, because that makes it more likely that it will survive. And if you don't stop the stress, and if you don't change anything in the situation, the body is further weakened and enters into a state of loss of homeostasis, like the balancing of hormones. And the body tries to repair itself with the limited tools it has, but that is why you also experience very, very strong warning signs. Like, for example, adrenaline rushes, labile blood pressure. I'll get more into the exact symptoms that I had in a second. And without sufficient levels of hormones, which you don't have, like in that situation, the body goes into a full-blown shutdown, burned out mode. So, in order to stop as much of the non-essential functions, of the functions which are not essential in order to survive, and the metabolic rate declines, which is of course never what we want. We always want a high metabolic rate and, you know, everything efficient, but that is not the case anymore in that survival mode. And yeah, it conserves body weight. And yeah, those that experience this stage 3 find themselves most of the time bedridden, like, because they don't get stuff done anymore. They just can't. They don't have the energy. They just fatigued, chronically fatigued, and they cannot function properly throughout the day, no matter how hard they try. And so that is adrenal fatigue at its finest. It's exhausted adrenals, and you just desperately have to do all you can to treat them right in that situation. Because if you don't apply the emergency brake, then your adrenals will fail, like, completely. And this stage is already so far, like, that it takes a long, long time to recover from it. I had it so it was the worst in April. Now it's kind of half year later. I'm still not recovered, and I met a friend who, it took him 2 years to recover. It can take even more, like, from what you read in the internet, but so you can easily calculate 1 year to recover from it, because it is metabolic damage. It is a severe damage in your hormonal and metabolic system. So yeah, that is why I have to talk about it, because it's so severe and no one knows about it. And then stage 3, that is a complete failure. Like eventually, if you don't change anything, if you don't find out what you actually have, if you don't treat the adrenals right and with like total attention to your adrenals, then eventually the adrenals will become totally exhausted. And patients at this stage will have a high chance of cardiovascular collapse and death. So it can be deadly. I'm not exaggerating. This is not my invented stuff. You can read it up on the internet. I got most of this stuff from drlam.com, grlam.com. So when adrenal fatigue has advanced to this stage, you can also get like the line between it and Addison's disease, also called adrenal insufficiency, can be blurred. So adrenal insufficiency doesn't equal adrenal fatigue. These are two pairs of shoes. And so now you may be wondering, so why didn't I know that? Like, how can this be? Like with the diet, how can it be that something is so logic and so important and crucial for health and we don't know about it? So actually, the adrenal dysfunction and its various stages were already recognized as distinct clinical syndromes since the turn of the 20th century. The most conventional or conventionally trained physicians are still unfamiliar with this condition because, and that is why, it is difficult to diagnose through traditional blood tests. I had blood work done on myself, and it didn't come up with anything. The doctor just told me, oh, everything's fine. You actually have to come up with a saliva test, but you have to pay money for it, and you also have to first know that you need the saliva test, and no doctor will tell you this. Actually, the doctor looked at me and said, saliva test. So what should that show more than a blood test? I had to fight to get results. So most patients are sent home with antidepressants after a short trial of hormonal replacement, but this, it's just completely not addressed the cause of the problem. So I had stage 3, the stage after the too high cortisol. So I already, in February and March, I went, and also the half year before, I already was in too high cortisol, but just on the edge. But then definitely in February and March, I got myself into this stage 2 of too high cortisol. And then by the end of March, I just completely crashed. And so that is when I had all of a sudden too low cortisol. And besides the overtraining, I also wrote my final exam, and that is more stress. But yeah, not the main stressor I had. So I got there basically by my own fault, because I didn't change anything and without knowing it. So I was unknowing and confused at stage 2 when I had the high cortisol and my symptoms began. But I just ignored my symptoms because I couldn't associate them to anything. I ate a healthy diet. I was exercising so much, so that was healthy. I always thought that would fight my problem. And I just ignored them because they weren't serious enough yet and not severe enough yet. And so I had to crash to actually find where I'm at. And I could beat myself up for this, yes.